Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Move, Crush, Count. This is the podcast where we learn how achievers are changing business growth strategies. We're here to help you grow your business and show you how to move the crowd, crush the competition, and count the money. Today's interview is sponsored by J&L Marketing. J&L Marketing is a digital and direct marketing agency that helps you deliver results with proven strategies that help you outsmart your competition, your toughest competitors, so you don't have to outspend them. The title of today's interview is Proven Ways to Turn Exhaustion into be an Extraordinary Life. It's about eliminating burnout. And my name is Scott Joseph, and I am talking with an expert when it comes to helping business leaders eliminate burnout, Dr. Sharon Grossman. Welcome, Dr. Sharon Grossman. Oh, let me unmute you.
I was going to do some sign language.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a
We're
hoot
excited.
already.
Yeah, well, listen, I love this topic. So when we were introduced by a mutual friend, I thought, oh, this is perfect because I know a lot of business leaders, especially ones that have been doing something for a very long time, at a very high, maybe high level success, very successful. At some point, they either get bored, they're burnt out, whatever. So I love this show. I think, I'm hoping we have a lot of people tune in today. And of course, we'll drop it later in a few weeks on the podcast as well. So whether you're watching live, and that'll be through YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, throw in some comments. We'll answer them live right here if you throw some in. We don't get all of them, so sometimes we have to go back to the channels and fill in those gaps. But we'll do our best. But you have a 20+ year, very successful track record in helping a lot of business leaders eliminate burnout. And I want to thank you for, first off, agreeing to come in here and share your knowledge and experience. I think it can help a lot of people, especially in our audience, understanding the rules. Like if you're feeling exhausted, maybe you haven't identified why. Maybe you're bored, whatever it might be. Maybe some things that used to excite you now become a little mundane, and all the things that come with that. How to turn that around and live an extraordinary life and level up. So let's jump right in. We'll ask some questions so the readers can, or not the readers, so our audience can understand where you're coming from and they can relate to you and how you can relate to their situation. And then we'll take it and get more specific. Does that sound good?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So give us, what is your story? What is your background? What is your experience as it relates to this?
So I started out as a psychologist and I had a private
Uh-oh.
practice. I'm not, people are like, are you reading my mind? I'm like, there's a difference between a psychic and a psychologist. So no, I don't have that power. So not to worry.
I think you're the first one on the show, right? So, I've got to really pay attention and bring my A game.
There you go. So, yes, I started as a psychologist. I had a private practice and I was working with a lot of high achievers, a lot of business owners and business professionals who were, for the most part, dealing with stress, anxiety, trauma. Those were like the top three things I would say in all different variations. And then at some point, I decided I was going to write a book on burnout. And so I started doing some research on the subject. And as I looked into it, this was back in 2018, I noticed that a lot of the books that had been written on the subject were focused on organizational change. And I thought, well, what about the poor Joe Schmo who's sitting there at his desk and is feeling totally burned out. And now he's got to wait for his organization to make a change. We know how quickly organizations do that, if at all. Right. And I thought, wow, this is so disempowering that I want to take all of the tools that I've been teaching my clients over the years and package them in kind of like a step-by-step process that we can apply that to burnout. And that's essentially what I did. And I spent about 2 years compiling all the research on the subject and taking all of the things that I was teaching my clients and putting it into a book. And so that's what eventually became the 7E solution to burnout.
What do you think's been the best source of training for you in order to be able to help so many people?
That's kind of an interesting question. I think that certainly everybody who is in my field goes to university and they study,
Mhm.
how to listen, how to reflect back, how to utilize different sort of strategies to help people unlock their unhelpful thoughts and things of that nature. But I also think that part of it is just who you are. And I've just always been the kind of person who, I mean, I'm an introvert. And so I've always been more of the quieter person who's in the room listening. And when I listen, I'm very analytical. That's just how my brain is. And so
Yeah,
I think just there were certain things that were just part of who I am that allowed me to come in and really connect with people and help them to uncover their blind spots and to challenge them and to make them think about things in a new way. So I think part of it is learned, but I think that there's a whole other part that's just kind of my character.
yeah. So, I asked that question to a lot of people because for me, a lot of it was on the job learning. When I
Yeah.
started the agency, you could apply what you learned throughout the years formally. Um, but the real stuff came from listening to people, listening to potential, prospects or clients and what do they want and adjusting and tweaking what I was doing. Would you say how quickly did success come for you? Before we get into specifics, help it out. How quick did the success come for you? Was it overnight or did you have to work a while to get there?
Oh, there is no overnight. That's just an illusion, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you kind of just keep going and keep going, keep trying new things, and I think any business owner can tell you like that's just what it is, right? And so you
Yeah.
have to be super resilient because a lot of things aren't going to work. You're going to try things and come up empty time
Yeah.
after time, and if you're not adamant about making it work, you're not going to last, right? And so it's easier to just give up on being a business owner and go and work for someone else if that's the thing that you're trying to work at. But even professionals who work for someone else, they have their own version of that where they try different things and they make mistakes and they're learning and hopefully they have a growth mindset and they're
Yeah.
looking at everything as an opportunity for growth and not berating themselves and making themselves become fearful of those mistakes, and then the perfectionism kicks in and they're like, I'm trying to control everything. Like,
Yeah.
so many people are doing that. That's part of why people burn out, actually.
Let me tell you, when I first started shooting videos and little promo stuff, and I was very uncomfortable. I was very uncomfortable getting on camera and posting all that on social and doing that. Because for one, I wanted to make it look like it wasn't staged and it wasn't. So I tried to cover. Sometimes it would take me. You talk about this perfectionism. Sometimes it would take me 25 to 50 takes. I'm like, it looks scripted. That looks this. And I'm thinking, my God, it's a 20-second video. Just get, get it out.
Get in and
Finally, I
get
just
out.
gave up. Yeah.
It's about the
So
message.
exactly. So Stephen here brings up a good comment. I posted it because to me, it's what this interview is all about. Here's a guy who's worked apparently at a General Motors dealership for 35 years, and he's just the same every day.
Yep.
And so, when he started, uh, that wasn't his mindset. And so it's about helping people like that get that level of excitement, I guess, back.
Yeah.
Like the job is brand new without sacrificing their home life. So,
Right.
what you're from what I understand and the research I've done, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're not sitting there pounding saying, hey, 80-hour work weeks, 100-hour work weeks, give up the family life. You've got to make these sacrifices in order to succeed. You're talking about when you talk about an extraordinary life, you're talking both personal and professional, correct?
Listen, there's nobody that works 100 hours a week that will tell you their life is extraordinary like that. Those things don't go together, no
I
matter how you
agree.
slice it. You
I
know,
I
you
ag
can love your job like all day long, but 100 hours a week, I mean, that's gonna burn anybody out,
I
right?
agree.
So getting back to this idea you've brought up actually a few times now in the beginning about being bored, and then we have this lovely gentleman from General Motors who is like Groundhog's Day, right?
Yep.
I think there's this myth about burnout that it's only when you work that 100-hour week that you burn out. And certainly that's a version of it. But the other version is when you're under challenged, when there's just not enough newness, or you're not plugged into the mission or the vision, and it just feels like it lacks purpose. So it's either that you're bored because it's not challenging enough, or that you're just feeling kind of disconnected. That's like a different version of burnout. So that's kind of like the understimulated version. Whereas what we normally think of is the overstimulation, where I've got too much to do. There's not enough time. It's crunch.
Yeah.
There's like pressure, and like I can't breathe. And so I'm working nights and weekends just to try to catch up. And I'm like on my vacation and I'm checking my emails, and like it's intense, right? So they're very different versions, but both actually lead to burnout. So I just want
You
to
know,
point that
I'm
out.
glad yeah, and I'm glad you did because you could have something very exciting. And to me, social media, and because let's face it, if you wanna be relevant and draw attention to you or your brand or whatever you're doing, your career, which if you're trying to level up, social media more than likely has to play a big part. And so there is this pressure of feeling like you've got to be everywhere all the time. Um, so I'm glad you brought up that second scenario because I wasn't thinking like that. And but that's there. That's a very real thing. So I'm glad let's dive right into this. Let's get into specifics how to fix this. So if you're coming to me or any other business leader out there, what would be the number one rule that a business leader needs to follow if they want to eliminate burnout?
So the number one, I don't know that it's a rule, but it's more of a strategy.
Okay.
Something that can be really helpful is managing your mind. So if you want to call it a rule, we can say you got to manage your mind in order to deal with the stress, because chronic stress is burnout, right? So we all have stress every single day, and stress isn't always bad. Stress can be really good, actually. But it's when stress is quote unquote perceived as something negative and it's chronic, it's day after day, like this guy at General Motors who sees every day as stressful, and then there's no change. So every day he comes to work and it's like, oh, here we go again, right? That chronic level of stress is what becomes burnout, right? And so the number one thing that I always start with my clients is managing your mindset. And here's what I mean. You could take any situation that feels stressful, and we can look at what is actually happening and what are your thoughts about the things that are happening. And what's really cool about this process is that when we start to separate the two, because people have it all confounded, they all think like, oh, these are the things that are actually happening, but so much of it is just your mind. It's just a story, right? And we have a choice. This is where the kind of empowerment comes in, is you can actually choose to think about the situation in a new way that actually changes how you feel. And so if we talk about stress as a feeling, right? It's something that's negative, and it's not just, stress. We can even elaborate for the people who are overwhelmed, let's say, with the demands and everything. For them, it's overwhelm and it's anxiety and it's drain, and like there's just all of this stuff going on over here on the left. And then on the right, we got the people who are under challenge, and and not feeling like any sort of sense of purpose or meaning in their job, right? And so for them, they're going to have a different kind of a negative thing. So we look at what's actually happening. And you can say, okay, well, you know what? I've been there for 35 years and it's just same old, same old. Okay, so what are you making that mean, right? What is your story about that? So maybe the story is, it sucks. I'm stuck. I want more. This isn't fulfilling. What the hell am I doing here? We're not going anywhere. I've been doing this way too long, right? These are all kinds of thoughts that you might have about the fact that everything is staying the same at your work.
And
Other
and
people,
this is where I'm going next. Like, so, like, what, how do you fix that, right? Like, so if that's the number, if your mindset, and I just want to make sure I'm following you. I ask a lot of dumb questions, by the
no,
way.
no, no, not dumb questions. Because listen, if you're thinking it, everybody else listening is probably thinking it too.
So if your mind, how do you fix that? How can you, if I'm having those thoughts,
Yeah.
what can I do to correct that and have the right mindset? If that's the first rule or strategy,
Yes.
like you said,
Yes.
to eliminating burnout, what do I do to fix it?
So the tool for this is emotional intelligence, which begins always with
Uh,
self-awareness.
I'm done. That means I'm done.
So step 1 is you have to be aware of your thoughts, right? And the trouble thing for the thing that gets people kind of in trouble here is that they don't distinguish between what the facts are and what their thoughts are. Oftentimes
Yeah.
we have these thoughts in our head and we believe them to be true
True.
because they just feel true. And therefore, we think that they're factual. And when we think that they're factual, then we feel like there's nothing that we can do about them. And that's why we feel so stuck. But when we start to separate out what really is true and what are your thoughts about the things that are true, then we can start to say, okay, well, how else can you think about it? Or when you think about it in this way, how does that make you feel? How would you like to feel differently? And then we can reverse engineer it. Or we might say, how else can you think about it? What is going well, right? So I'll give you an example. I was about to start working with a potential client. And as we were talking about some of this stuff, she said to me, why should I have to work on my mindset when the problem is my industry? And
Yeah.
I said, okay, well, let's do a little exercise. Okay. Tell me what is going on with your work. And then she mentioned these are the things that are troubling her and so forth. And I said, now tell me, what do you like about your job? And she started to say, well, I get to work with really nice people. And she was a veterinarian. So she liked working with animals, and the environment that she worked in was actually quite lovely. And so I said, okay, great. Now, what would happen if every single day you went to work and you just focused on those things? What would be different? And she said, "Oh, I never thought about it like that. I think I would feel lighter." And I said, so here's the thing, right? We actually haven't changed anything. We haven't changed your industry. We haven't changed your circumstances. We've just refocused your mind. And all of a sudden you feel differently. This is why working on your mind is important, because when we think so much of it is out there, it's disempowering. But when we recognize how much we're contributing to the issue, we actually take our power back, because then we can change the thoughts, which change how we feel. And because stress and because burnout are basically part of your emotions, your negative emotions, and that accumulation over time, if we change the way that we think and the thing that before was stressful is no longer stressful, then we can eliminate burnout.
One of the things, and what I'm recognizing there is you change perception by the questions you ask yourself, right? In other words, so I'm very big on like routines. Not
Mhm.
throughout. I'm not good on my routine throughout the day, but I'm very good at my routine, especially in the morning.
Mhm.
Um, and at times I'm good at my routine at night. So, but I'm very good every morning. I've got a set routine. And one of the things I like to do, once I do my prayer and my meditation type stuff, is I do ask myself questions that put me in the right mental state.
Mhm.
You know, what am I most excited about my life? What am I most excited about today? You know, and it's those type of questions. And if I don't have an answer to that, I do ask, well, if I did have something that's exciting, what would it be? Um,
Great
so,
question.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so I ask those questions, but usually what I try to do is when I come up with an answer is I want to find ways to associate the feeling a little bit stronger. So what about that makes me excited? Why is that excited? What about that? And, if I'm able to do this and that, and I try to level up, I guess, the value of the questions, or because I want
Yeah.
to feel it deeper than just answering it.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because we were just talking about changing your mind, but the thing that I want people to also remember is that you can't lie to yourself. Like you can't just come up with a thought
Right.
and be like, "Oh, well that sounds good on paper." Because that doesn't work. It actually has to feel true. And the thing is that we're not making stuff up here. It's just that you normally might focus on the negative of the situation because that's how your brain is wired. And all we're doing is saying, well, what else is true? And how else can you think about it that feels true to you?
Yeah.
And when kind of like my client that I just shared, she came up with these things. We didn't try to contrive them, right? She said, well, also true is that I love the work that I do and I love the people that I work with, right? And I'm like, okay, well, those two things are true now, right? There's the negatives that are stressing you out, and then there's all these other great things. What would happen if we just shifted the focus? Right? And that's an important thing is don't try to go about this in such a way where you're making stuff up that doesn't feel true or sounds good on paper because that doesn't work.
You know what I like about this too is I think this show should not only be helping people that are trying to get out of maybe a rut, um, and improve, but if you're leading people, I mean, let's face it, you know, there's a good percentage of all of our teams out there where they need a little help and a little guidance. So hopefully it's not only about applying some of these techniques that you're talking about to yourself, but also maybe you can ask in certain one-on-one meetings with people some of these questions to make them look at things a little bit differently and help nudge that along. I don't it just Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
No, for sure. I think it has to start with you. So if
Yeah.
you're the leader, then you have to get yourself in order. Like if you're totally stressed out, you're going to spill over into everybody that you come across. So the people that you're leading are going to see that you're stressed and you're going to be irritable and you're going to be short and you're not going to want to listen. You're going to be
Yeah.
impatient. So you first have to do the work on yourself because things are going to be stressful. And when you're working with people, that is perhaps the number one stressor because those are things you cannot control. People might be doing things that you don't like, or their personality just rubs you the wrong way. And it's easy to get really stressed out. And so you first have to contain yourself. And then once you've gotten in control of that, now you can apply those same strategies because you're like, hey, I know what it's like because I just did this on myself. Let me now guide and lead this team in that same exercise as they're struggling with each other and customers and everything else.
All right, so we've covered strategy number 1, focusing on your mind and some techniques and ways to improve that. And I want to go into the next one, but before we do have a question that popped up from Chuck Morelli. He wants advice on how to put away his phone from time to time so he can disengage from business and not feel guilty about it. So he says he's tried it, but he always ends up coming back to the phone to make sure he doesn't miss something. Now, I know his team lead very well. I know Chuck well. I also know uh, his his uh, his direct report, and his direct report's probably like saying, "Chuck, when I text you, I need you to respond." But But so what advice could you give someone like Chuck? Because that's got to be very common
Oh, yeah.
right there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's different versions of this. There's the I'm going to miss something, so I can't put the phone away. Or I just did an interview for a journalist who was writing about burnout for tech people, so programmers and such, who
Yeah.
work in teams. And their biggest thing is I can't step away from my work because I'll be letting the team down. So very similar. It's just, is it interpersonal or is it between you and your phone, sort of a thing? I think there's a couple of things we can say here. For Chuck, I would say what the emotion that I'm picking up on is fear, right? And he's talking about this fear of missing out.
Hmm.
And that fear stems from a thought, because our thoughts and our feelings are very much connected. And the thought is, if I step away from my phone, then I will miss something. And then he's got some sort of other piece to that puzzle of like, then what? And that's the kind of question I would ask him. So if you did miss something in that one moment, then what are you really worried is going to happen? Right. So it's like that. It could be about perception, kind of like a step away from the team. This idea of like people will think that I am not working hard enough or that I'm goofing off. Or it could be that I'm going to miss something and my boss is going to be mad at me, or that I'm going to get overwhelmed with the amount of stuff that accumulates. And so I have to constantly be on. So there's different versions of these thoughts that lead to that fear, which then leads to the behavior of constantly being on the phone. And so I think there's a mindset shift that has to happen here. And that is this: the truth is not what your brain tells you, but the truth is that all of those things will be right there for you when you get back from your break, when you get back from your vacation. They're not going anywhere. And nothing's going to blow up and no one's going to get hurt if you take time aside for yourself. But the other thing that's also true is that when you don't step away from your phone and you don't take your vacation time and you're not taking breaks throughout the day to really disengage from work, to really unplug, then you're more likely to carry that stress with you all day long. And that's how that stress becomes chronic, because you're constantly plugged in. And so I think that when I say it's a mindset shift, it's that we approach work in this very short term approach of I got to get stuff done now. I got to be on now. I got to work on this now. And it's because you want to look good to your coworkers, to your boss, to whoever, and it gives you a sense of purpose perhaps. But it's not a long-term strategy, because if you're never unplugging from these things, then you will burn out. And you know what happens to people who are burned out? They can't
Well,
show up. They
yeah,
can't show up. They
yeah,
now are like lying in bed. They have no energy. They have brain fog. They can't focus. Their productivity goes down. They get
yeah.
depressed. I've seen cases as difficult as getting hospitalized, developing autoimmune diseases. People become suicidal. I mean, it gets really ugly really fast.
Yeah, and
Eh,
from what I understand, like in the entrepreneurial world, um, I mean, it's actually a big problem, is it not?
It's a huge problem.
Yeah.
But it's the culture. It's this hustle mentality where we have to only focus on the here and now of like, I got to get this done now. And you're not thinking about your future self. You're not
You
taking care of your future self.
you brought up some interesting points there. He's going to respond here. Hold on. You hit the hit right on present day for my team all day. So, but you went a little deeper in the sense that you talked about, all right, so you've got this fear of missing out, but then if I miss out on something, what is you took it another level, right? Like, how am I going to perceive my work ethic? How does my boss perceive what I'm doing? Things such as that. And
Yeah.
I found that interesting. And what popped into my head when you started saying that is there's a lot of people working remote right now.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a lot of businesses, especially a lot of the bigger organizations, where they still haven't brought people back to work full time, or they're allowing a hybrid model, you know? And as a leader, so maybe you can help both sides here. All right. As a leader, when you have some people working remote and they don't get back to you quick, and let's assume this is all during work hours. All right.
Mhm.
They don't get back to you quick, and there's this it's easy to fall into this perception that maybe that person isn't working or right on top of it, or they goofing off. Why aren't they as accessible if they were right here in the office with me? And I'm sure vice versa. What advice would you give the leader, and what advice would you give the remote worker? Because to me, there's almost more pressure on the remote worker to be more accessible during work hours than the person that's sitting right there, because the leader can just walk up and ask questions then. Um, I don't what's your thoughts on all that? Is that an issue?
During COVID, when a lot of people started working remotely, what we kept hearing is that people are putting in more and more hours than they would when they were in the office, because there wasn't that separation between work and life. It's like, now I'm working from home and I'm living from home, so I'm just on all the time.
Right.
And I just have to check my email, or I just have to answer this call, or I just have to work on this one last thing. And so we actually saw a lot of burnout happening, even though all the years prior to COVID, everyone was like, oh, the dream would be to work from home. Right.
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
everybody was like, oh no, now I'm so burned out. Right. uh, so it's funny that you asked that, because I think there's both cases. There's the people who are just nonstop, always on, because they're working from home and they can. And then there's the people who are like, I'm home. Nobody really sees what I'm doing, so I can get away with not really doing much. So I think as a leader, you have to know your people
Yeah,
and you have to set expectations. But I also think it's important not to be that micromanager
right.
and that person who is trying to just control everything and everyone all the time. And I was just talking to someone who was saying, oh, the company that I work for, they actually have this technology now that they're monitoring keystrokes. So when I'm working from home, if I'm not typing, and if I'm not even just like moving my fingers on the keyboard or something, they know that I'm not, quote unquote, working. And I really don't like that, because now it's like, as a worker, you have to figure out, how can I pretend to like hit a keystroke on something just to show this technology that I'm actually working? Because working can be a lot of things. It could be I'm reading something. It could be I'm thinking about something as I'm like looking at my screen. It could be so many things. And
You
and now we're just measuring productivity by keystrokes.
see, all you have to do is get one of those Theraguns and just have it hover over your keyboard. Then you look like the
Ding,
hardest
ding,
worker
ding.
in the business.
There you go. But now it's like we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot, right? Because we're like, oh, we're gonna have this technology that micromanages people, and then the people are like, yeah, well, we've got some robot that's pressing buttons. I mean, like, let's not play
Right.
games, right?
Yeah,
Like, if you're
I
really
agree.
serious, let's be serious about
I just look at
business.
results. I
Yeah.
just I look at results. I always tell I don't care if someone works 1 hour a day or they work 14 hours a day. I care about the results. And quite honestly, I value the person that can get the same results done in 1 hour much more than I do the one that takes 14. Because the one that if it takes somebody 2 to 3 times, I'm exaggerating obviously, but if it takes someone 2 to 3 times as long to accomplish the same result,
Oh yeah.
then
Then we have a problem.
well, not yeah, because usually that person gets burnt out. That person complains about the longer hours. That person, there's all. I like the person that can get stuff done quick and accurately, assuming all the quality of the work's the same and all
Right.
that.
So
But
so if you're a leader and you have somebody who takes 3 times as long, you have to figure out what's really going on. Is it that they're easily distracted? Is
yeah,
it that they're burned out and they just have brain fog and they can't focus? Is
right,
it that they're not feeling well? What's going on? Or is it that they just don't understand something, or it's over their head, or they need more training. There's so many reasons. And so we have to uncover the root issue before we just make this judgment of, oh, you're not really working hard and why is it taking you this long? Like, let's actually approach our team with curiosity rather than blame, because then what happens is people become defensive and communication just breaks down.
Yeah, great point. All right, so let's jump back into these strategies. So you talked about mindset earlier and ways that you could alter, shift your mindset to perceive things the way they truly are,
Mhm.
without fooling yourselves. What would be the second rule or strategy to eliminate burnout?
The second one is optimizing the way that you work. And the reason this is important, once you are able to focus on things in the right way, because you're managing your mind, then we don't have all of this inner distraction, like the voice that tells you, oh, that's not good enough. Like when you were making those videos and you were like, oh, I got to do it again and again and again. Right. Like that was just a voice in your head. So you're like, okay, I got this down. Like I'm managing. Now it's like, how do I get the work done more quickly so that I have more time for myself? And you asked in the beginning about those people that work those 100-hour weeks. It's not about putting in more and more time, because actually research shows that when you work over 55 hours a week, your productivity goes down. And so we
Hmm.
think that by putting more time in, we're going to get more done. But in the same time that you're putting in, you're getting a lot less after 55 hours than before the 55 hours, right? And
Yeah.
so it's really an invitation for you to say, oh, well, if research actually shows this to be true, how can I get my work done in 55 hours or less? And then spend the rest of the time on my life outside of work,
Yeah.
just unplugging, just enjoying. I mean, why are we working so hard to
So how
begin
do we
with?
do it? So if it's simple, it's not as that. I know that's not simple. That's a bad word. Um, but if it is, if that's if it's as easy as saying, all right, do this and managing your time, give us some techniques in order to be more productive in that shorter window. Because
This is
without
what,
that, then right, then you're almost if it's about delivering results and you don't get the results done in that window, you still got to get it done, right? So
yeah. So the question is, why aren't you getting the results? So again, we want to look at what's going on and kind of dissect it and see what the culprit is. Is it that you are distracted because you've got too many tabs open on your computer, and you keep getting notifications from social media, or that there's constant emails coming in? This is a big one, where you're constantly checking the inbox so that you can quickly respond to people. What that
and it
does is it
and
takes go ahead.
it's not just the inbox, right? I mean, you're
It's
getting
Slack.
notifications.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
you're getting notifications. Oh, someone replied to this, or they have a question on Instagram or LinkedIn or Facebook. I've got to
Yep.
respond. You want to respond quick, and so it's
Yep.
all these things distracting us.
Absolutely. So I would say the first thing is you want to eliminate all of that, because we all have a certain time frame during which we do our best work. For most people, it's in the morning. And then you have your night owls who maybe take
That's
longer to
me.
kind of wake up. And then for you, it's a little bit later, but you have to know what that time frame is for you. And that is a time frame that you have to absolutely eliminate all distractions so that you can get the most work done, because your brain is on fire at that time. So that's where you're turning off. And there's these apps today that you can actually have it turn stuff off for you. So like it monitors, are you on social media, or doesn't, or kind of blocks certain sites, and all notifications are turned off and things like that. So you can actually use technology to help you with this stuff. But ultimately it's about, maybe you throw your computer out, and for that 2-hour time frame you just sit with a piece of paper and you're brainstorming, or you have a meeting with someone and you're hashing it out. Or if you are on your computer, maybe you just have a blank sheet, like a blank document, and you're just typing stuff out, right? Like you want to think about what is and this is the other thing, is it's not just about eliminating the distractions and working during the best time frame, but also prioritizing what are the most important things, because it's so easy for us to have 100 things on our to-do list. And then we never catch up and we never feel like we're accomplished because there's always more stuff showing up. And then we've got all the emails we got to answer, and there's just so much to do. It's just impossible to get it all done. So you have to sit down and think about, what are the things that I absolutely have to get done today, that if I get them done are going to move the needle the most, right? Because my attention can go in 100 different directions, but what's the number one thing?
Yeah.
And then when you figure that out, then you figure out how long is that going to take, and can I get it done during this little time frame that I've put aside in order to focus on that. And you get as much done as you can during that time when you have the most mental energy. And then when you have those times during the day where your energy just kind of drops, and it's usually after lunch because we've eaten some carbs and we're tired and we've been working for a bunch of hours already and things like that. When you know you have periods during the workday that you have less energy, then you can take on those smaller energy tasks like answering emails, like checking up on different things that you would have on your to-do list that are follow-up things, or checking in on with other people and things like that. So you have to think about, what are the things that take more brain waves and less brain waves, or brain power, and
Yeah.
be strategic about what you focus on and when.
Yeah, that's great advice. What would be the third thing? Is there
So
three?
there is,
I-
and this is perhaps something that is a little bit harder for people to understand, because I think it's easy for us to understand the importance of managing our mind and optimizing the way that we work. But the third rule, as you like to call it, is really upgrading your identity and really changing that relationship with yourself, because so many people who are burned out because of the negative voice inside their head, because they beat themselves up. So they need to have more self-compassion, and they are trying to prove their worth through their productivity, which is why they are so driven and so on all the time. And it's really about taking a step back and saying, like, hey, you're already worthy. You don't have to prove anything. And just kind of sitting in that for a second and being like, oh, because it's so foreign for people. We're so programmed to have to prove our worth. Our productivity is, in this culture of hustling, is the thing that everybody is looking at. What have you accomplished? What have you done? And we start to believe that we're only worthy if we accomplish something. And so
right.
we don't put emphasis on ourselves. We don't take care. Everybody says, oh, I don't have time for exercise. I don't have time. If I had time, yeah, I would do it because I feel really good when I do that. But who's got time for that, right? We always put
I
ourselves on the back burner because we're prioritizing all of this accomplishment.
I only feel good about exercise when I'm done. I don't feel good during. I
Which
because
is
I actually
fine. Which
I
is
feel
fine because you're still
during I'm like,
reaping.
oh.
Listen, that's taking care of your future self. You're saying, like, right now,
True.
I am not having the best time on the planet, but I know that my future self is going to thank me for this later because I'm going to feel
Right.
amazing.
I envy the people that can, during the workout, enjoy the process of that, because, gosh, it's so much easier to stay motivated to do the daily, what you need to do daily from a physical fitness standpoint. Um, when you enjoy the process, let me ask you this question. Maybe I need to ask myself better questions. Maybe I need to ask myself, how can I enjoy this process? So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Well, so part of it is, how are you thinking about it? Like, if you think about your exercise routine, you might have thoughts like, oh, this is so hard, or I don't like to sweat, or, I'm tired and I'd rather relax, right? And you have all these thoughts, which all of which may be true. But
I don't mind the sweating part. I just don't like doing what it takes to sweat. So, that's the part when my heart rate's running so hard and I'm breathing so hard, or I've got muscle fatigue to the point where, I can't
Yeah.
push another rep or something like that, right? I'm
Mhm.
just like, God, I could be doing something else.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's very similar what you're talking about to how we think about stress. Sometimes when we're faced with something that feels really stressful, we have a lot of negative thoughts about it,
Yeah.
which actually makes us feel stressed about the stress,
Hmm.
right? And the truth of the matter is, if you changed how you thought about that situation and you said, this is good for me, this is really challenging me, this is pushing me beyond what I think I can do, and I'm going to
Yeah.
see where this can take me. All of a sudden, you've taken a situation from a negative, stressful, threatening kind of situation that you feel trapped and stuck and all this stuff that actually brings on more burnout, to thinking about it as, this is hard, but I'm made for hard things. I am resilient. I can do this. I can push myself and let's see how far I can go. Right? And it's not about like killing yourself. It's not about hurting yourself, but it's about not being complacent with the status quo and saying like what else is out there? Like, what else can I do? What can I achieve that I didn't think would be possible for me? And that's
Yeah.
true whether it's in your business. If you're making $100,000 this year, can you make 200 next year? And maybe you can't. But by asking the question and
That
challenging
answer is
yourself,
always yes.
by challenging yourself, you're more likely to figure out a solution than if you don't even try. And
Yeah.
it's going to be stressful because it's something new. You haven't done it before. It's hard, but we're very creative people and we can sit down and ask good questions. We can look for mentors. There's so much you can do to try and figure it out, but you'll only try to figure it out if you first challenge yourself or if you first ask yourself that question.
Yeah. So a lot of what I'm hearing, even throughout, it's kind of interwoven through these three strategies we talked about, is a lot of self-talk, a lot of I go back to asking yourself the right questions, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's my wife criticizes me all the time, right? So I am a confident person, so I don't want to I sit there, but I can also be very self-aware and critical of myself. So gosh, if I do something ignorant, I have no problem telling myself that I'm a dumbass. And so my wife's like, "Why do you tell yourself that?" It's I'm
She's
like, "What is
right.
correct?" And so I love that you're saying this because um, even people who have accomplished something in life, they probably don't recognize some things that they're doing. Some of the self-talk that they have for themselves, they probably don't view that as damaging because of some of the things they've accomplished, right? And so what would happen if they eliminated that and actually flipped it and were more positive in how they
Yeah, it's a really good
communicated?
question because a lot of times that self-talk, that negative self-talk is what drives us harder. And so
Yeah.
sometimes we have more to show for ourselves because we have just beaten ourselves up. But that only takes you so far because at some point you really are so beaten up that
Yeah.
you just have nothing left in the tank. And then you also have formulated this belief through practicing these kinds of ideas that you really are an idiot and that you really are, incapable of doing more. And really, it comes down to this fixed mindset of thinking, if I've made a mistake, then I am a mistake and I can't do any better and I shouldn't even try because, you know, what's the point? Whereas if you have a more growth oriented mindset, then you can say, you know what? I tried and kudos to me for going out there and putting myself out there and it didn't work out. But what can I learn from this so that the next time I go out there, and that's the idea with this mindset is that you keep coming back out The next time I'll be smarter about it. I'll know more about it. I have more experience now. Right. And that's, I mean, if you asked me in the beginning about this overnight success business, and I would say this is the reality. None of us came out of the womb knowing everything
Yeah.
and being amazing in everything, right? Like we
My,
all have
my
a
mom
process.
told me my mom told me I thought I did.
She
So, you know.
well, thinking you do and
uh,
and actually knowing two different things. Yes.
yes.
So so I think it's just about the approach that you take in life, and the more you have your own back and you say, you know what, it didn't work out. And yeah, I mean, I have feelings about that. Like I'm frustrated or I'm disappointed or I'm sad, right? But I'm not going to give up. This is where the resiliency comes in.
Yeah.
I'm going to look at this mistake and what can I do better next time? Maybe I stepped on somebody's toes and they confronted me, and now I'm like, "Oh, I didn't realize that I did that. Next time if I'm in a situation like that, I'll do this instead." Or maybe I put myself out there with that video that I made for my business, that 30-second video, and
Yeah.
I get some negative comments. People are like, "Oh, that was crap," or whatever,
Yeah.
right? That I'm not gonna use that as a reason not to continue to improve and put myself out there and try again. I'm not going to let these roadblocks get in my way. If I'm burned out, I'm not going to say I'm going to give up on my career. I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to like have to completely reinvent myself. Like maybe, but why are we running so fast? Right? Like why are we trying to escape everything? Like what if we took a look at like what's going on and figure out why you're burned out and what you can do about it, and maybe if you love the work that you do, maybe we can salvage the situation. Maybe we can help you get back to yourself and become so extraordinary in how you feel and how you show up for work that even though those circumstances haven't changed, you've changed.
You know what's interesting is as you're saying all this stuff, and especially this last few minutes, this goes for people, whether it's personal or professional, right?
100%.
There
Yeah.
are people stuck in marriages that think that it isn't that wonderful. And I want to be very clear. I am very happy in my marriage. So, I don't want my wife watching or listening to this thinking I'm talking about me. This is not about a friend. Uh, um, but they can apply the same techniques and strategies personally as they can professionally and change their outlook and their mindset. And God, literally everything you've said, I think applies both, professionally and personally. But where I'm going with this is I I sit here and I think, how many of us have, whether you're an employee at a company or you're a leader leading an employee, and maybe they've been with you a while, maybe they're a little burnout, maybe they think the grass is a little greener, whatever it might be, and they're contemplating a switch, a change, because that will fix it all, right?
Yeah.
I just need a change of scenery, and that's going to change my mindset and this and that. But usually the same problems that existed wherever they're at follow them. And what I there are a lot of times, especially when businesses are going through change. And let's face it, the last few years, there's probably been a lot of change with a lot of organizations. Not everybody deals with change well. And they might be thinking, maybe I should try this over here because I don't want to go through what I'd have to go through in my current job, right?
Mhm.
And I always think to myself, you're changing no matter what. When you change an organization, when you change whatever you think's going to help you, change is happening. When you change an organization, you have to change and learn all new processes, all new people, how to communicate with what, who's responsible for this and that. You got to learn a new product, a new service, whatever it might be. Whereas with your current organization, you could go through that change and you're usually changing a lot less It's a weird dynamic. Some people think by changing jobs or companies, they go through less change, but the reality is it's more. But this goes back to the perception of the questions they ask themselves and what's reality versus not. Does it not? Am I wrong in that?
I mean, I think it's very individualistic. I think there's certainly situations that when people have decided I'm going to go through a career change because I'm just done. And I've seen this a lot in healthcare in the last couple of years, where a lot of nurses and physicians have become coaches, have become other things, consultants or helping other physicians with burnout and other things. I think there's certainly a lot of change that happens when you completely shift your career, but a lot of them are happy. And so I say good for them, but it's also not for everybody. I think coming back to your idea of asking good questions, which is something that we do as part of the coaching process, that's how we challenge people to think differently. We actually can say that if you ask the right questions about your career, then you can see, are you running away from something, or are you really at peace with this idea of leaving your job or
Yeah.
changing your career? And I would definitely encourage people not to escape, not to change in order to run away from an unresolved problem, but try to first solve the problem, see how it feels. If it, like, coming back to our friend from General Motors, it's Groundhog's Day at work. So, what have you done to spice it up? Have you asked for more responsibility? Maybe like a shift in what you're doing, maybe more training. Is there something else that you can take on? Maybe leadership. I mean, what are you doing about it? If there's nothing they can offer you and you're just reached that ceiling, yeah, maybe it's time for a
Right.
change. Right?
Right.
So it's not
Yep.
it's not so black and white. I think it really depends on the situation.
Yeah. I just think it's important to recognize um, change is happening no matter what you do.
Oh,
So if
100%.
if you're just feeling uncomfortable because something new's coming down the pike,
Then we come back
recognize.
to we come back to rule number 1, which is manage your mind.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to be respectful of your time. We're coming up on an hour. I've got a few more questions. Do you have the time to go through them? Be honest with me.
Yes.
Um, all right, good.
Let's do it.
All right. So what are some you mentioned earlier some tools and resources. So like that could help us, whether it's manage time or even maybe help us with our mindset. What are some tools or resources that you feel can be helpful with what we've discussed, or help you eliminate burnout, or maybe be more productive? And then what are some tools or resources that you think are kind of on the way out? So it's a two-part question, or becoming obsolete.
So I like to think about strategy and skills. And as we talked about this three-part process, which starts with managing your mind and then goes to optimizing the way that you work. And then it's really about upgrading your identity and really working on your relationship with yourself so that you see how extraordinary you already are. The three skills that go alongside those three steps are: to manage your mind, we said it's emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
To optimize the way that you work, it's really a lot of time management type strategies. And then for that relationship with yourself, it is a lot of mindfulness. And so when we think about what are some of the different tools out there that can help with these things. So for instance, with managing your mind, one of the tools that I share with my clients is a thought log. It's basically a worksheet where you're jotting down what happened, what are your thoughts about what happened, how did that make you feel, what did you do as a result of that. Once you have all that down, then you can start to look at, especially the thoughts, how you want to change them, and how, when you change them, how the new thoughts make you feel. Right? You can also reverse engineer it. Like, if I want to do X behavior, how do I need to feel first? And in order to feel this way, what do I need to think about this situation in order to generate that emotion? So we
Give me
can
an
work.
example. Give me
Yeah.
an example.
So let's take the example that you mentioned about creating those 30-second videos.
Okay.
So the behavior is I'm creating the video. And there's a fear, that's the emotion, the fear that it's not going to be good enough,
Right.
right? Or that people are going to think it's crap. And the thought is I have to keep trying to do it over and over again until I get it just right. Right? So that
Right.
perfectionism kicks in.
Yeah.
So you can kind of enter the equation at any point. You can say, well, how do I really want to feel? Like I'm really feeling a lot of anxiety about this. How do I really want to feel? And you might say, well, I just want to feel confident. Say, okay, well, how do I need to think about this in order to feel confident? And you say, well, I have to say to myself, you know what? This is great. Like you're putting yourself out there. You look good. You know, maybe there's some things that we can tweak, but let's just get this out there. Let's just feel really good about what we're doing. This is video number 1. And maybe I have a goal that I'm going to put a video out every single day or every single week. And so if I have a year, that's 52 videos. This is number 1. Let's just go with it. Like I'm going to just be all in on this, right? Feel more confident. I'm going to put it out there. So the behavior actually changes. It's not that I now have to keep creating new videos, but it's like I actually can finally post this. And then I sit back and I wait for the critics. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh, nobody said anything bad. Maybe it's okay. And then we're like, okay, now I feel even more confident. I'm going to do video. What am I going to do next? Video number 2, right? And so you're kind of shifting the whole paradigm by asking yourself the question, like, how do I want to feel about this? And then aligning the thought with the feeling. You could also look at the situation from the thought perspective to begin with and say, you know, I have a lot of really self-critical thoughts. Like I'm telling myself that I suck, that I don't look good, that
I'm not good at this.
I'm not good at this.
Yeah.
And maybe that's true. Maybe you're not good at it. That's okay. What are you making that mean?
I'm phenomenal. I'm phenomenal.
Well, here's the thing. Remember we talked about how you don't lie to yourself because that doesn't work, right? Maybe it's true that you're not good at this.
Yeah.
But what are you making that mean? Because there's another thought underneath that. The thought underneath that is probably something like, I'm not good at this, and everyone's going to be able to tell that I am totally green, and they're going to laugh me off social media. Or, right? Like there's some other thought that creates the fear.
I'll give you one.
Yeah.
I think this is, at least it was true for me in the beginning. So I I assume every business leader is just like me. And so, I think there are people out there, at least for me, where you don't want the perception to be that I'm trying to make this about me and not, because you do the videos to draw attention to the business. What can it accomplish for your potential clients and your prospects, this and that. But there is this underlying, at least for me, that people thought I was doing it for me, like this. It was an egotistical
Like an ego thing.
like,
yeah.
and
that's just a thought.
Yeah.
That's just a thought.
Yeah.
And then I might ask you, well, is that true?
No.
Are you doing it just for you?
No, because I would have preferred not to do it at all.
Okay. And then I would ask you, well, how do you know that that's what people are thinking?
Exactly. No, I think yeah.
Right.
No,
So
it's made up in my mind. It's made up in my mind.
It's just a story. It's just a story. And I think what really happens is we're scared of putting ourselves out there. So we make it about something else, which creates fear that keeps us from doing the thing.
Yeah.
Right. It's like,
that's awesome.
It's right. So it's like our brain is trying to protect us and keep us safe. It's like, no, don't put yourself out there. You might get rejected. So let me make up this story about how everyone's going to think it's really about your ego. And so like, you don't want that. So let's just not do it at all. Right. Scrap it.
So let me ask you this, and you may have just answered it. Is there a mistake out there? If there was one mistake that you see that most business leaders make that create a lot of mental stress or anxiety, what would it be?
I think it's what we said earlier. It's this short-term approach to success and this coupling of success and happiness. Like if I achieve this, then I'll be happy. That
Yeah.
mindset doesn't work, because how many
Yeah.
people are super successful and they're absolutely miserable,
Yeah.
right? And I share this actually in one of my trainings, because I worked with a woman who was a sales leader, and I talked to her on a Thursday, and she said to me, "If I just make this one sale, I'm going to be so happy." And I said, "Well, that's interesting. When was the last sale that you made?" And she said, "Just this Monday." And I said, "And how did you feel after you made that sale?" She said, "Oh, I felt so happy." And I said, "And how long did that last?" And she said, "For 1 hour." I said, "And then what happened?" She said, "And then I started
Her boss is
stressing."
like, all right, good. Maybe she's going to try hard on hour 2.
And then I said, "Then what happened?" She said, "Then I started stressing about the next sale."
Yeah.
And I said, "So here's the problem with your whole paradigm, is that you're trying to make sales, which make money, which means that you're successful, and you're thinking that success or money equals happiness, but they're two different things."
Yeah.
And so you can't just put the two together, because if you're focused on the sales call and making the sale, you can say it's going to help me reach my financial goal, but you can't say it's going to help me reach my happiness goal, because happiness
Yeah.
doesn't come from sales.
Yeah.
So
I
sometimes
love
the wires are crossed.
I talk to a lot of business owners. This podcast is um, given me benefits that I didn't anticipate when I first started doing it. This is a great example. I learned so much interviewing people, and so I think most business owners go through these different stages, and there's some do, some don't. But when you start off and you start a business, your intentions are so pure, and it's usually to help people or help a business solve some type of problem or help them accomplish something, right? So the
Mhm.
intention and all the focus when you're first doing it is, how can I bring so much value that it's going to help them avoid this or accomplish this, right?
Exactly.
And so it's all about that. It's helping people win. It's whatever that gives you. It's not the sale that has to happen to be successful, but
Right.
it's more about the help. Then what happens is these businesses, they start getting successful, and then their focus shifts to, okay, how can I get more successful? How can I make a little bit more money if I tweak this or if I do this? And the focus changes, and all of a sudden, even if they level up and they become more successful, it's not as fulfilling for them, and it's almost like they have to get back to why they started. Is that
So it's a funny story about that. This is kind of like one of the stories, like fables with a moral. But I was just reading this. So there's this guy who goes out fishing on his boat, and this businessman comes up to him and he says, "Oh wow, these are really big fish. How long does it take you to catch these fish?" And he says, "Oh, maybe just a couple of hours." And he says, "And then what do you do the rest of the day?" And he's like, "Oh, then I come home, I kiss my wife, I play with my kids, I read a book, I relax." He's like, "Oh, well, I could help you, like, be so much more successful. You can make so much more money." It's like, "So what we can do is, like, you'll just spend more time out at sea, you'll catch a lot more fish, and then we'll be able to buy more boats and hire more people that are going to be able to go out there and get so much more fish, and your business is just going to boom." And he's like, "And then what?" "Well, then you'll have all of this money." And he's like, "Yeah, okay, but what am I going to do then?" He's like, "And then finally you'll be able to retire." He's like, "And then what?" He's like, "And then you'll be able to come home and kiss your wife and play with your kids and sit down and read a book and relax." He's like, "But I'm already doing that."
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
So it's kind of funny how sometimes, like, we think like more is better,
Yeah.
but it's not about that. It's about the quality of your life.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right. So, what is the biggest rule or strategy you've broken? All right. And then what did you do to fix it and get back on track?
Ooh, rule or strategy that I've broken.
In terms of, let's focus it in, like, contributed to your own burnout or exhaustion or, you know,
Yeah, actually, so this is a funny thing. I obviously specialize in burnout. And every time I come on a podcast, people ask me, so what's your burnout story? Right?
Yeah.
Because every single other burnout coach out there has a burnout story. They have a recovery story, then coach other people based on their experience, which is a beautiful thing. It's like the hero's journey. And my story is a little bit different. And it goes like this. So when I was in graduate school, I went to the annual conference for the American Psychological Association. And there was a session that was led by the psychologist that had a private practice. And I very distinctly remember him talking about how when you are in private practice, burnout rates are like through the roof. It's so easy to burn out because you're like a factory. You're working by yourself and it's just like one patient after the other coming through the door. And if you are a business owner, you don't have benefits, you're not working for anybody else. So the more patients you see, the more money you make. And so it's so easy for you to just get stuck in that sausage factory model that you burn out. And so when it was time for me to go into private practice, I remembered what he said. It really stuck with me. And I said, if I am going to do this, I am going to do this right. And from the get-go, I was very strategic about how I set my practice up. So first, I found a space that was near my gym. And I set my hours such that I would see 3 patients in the morning back to back. I would do all the notes for those patients, so I never had to take work home. I would take an extended lunch break where I would first go to the gym, work out, and then come back and have my lunch. And then I would see another stretch of patients in the afternoon, do my notes, and then go home. I never worked nights. I never worked weekends. And I got all my exercise in during the day. So I was very strategic about that. And as a result of that, I actually never did burn out.
Yeah.
And
That's
so what
great.
I think the message here is that instead of just jumping in and focusing on what you want to achieve in terms of how much money you're going to make or how fast you're going to grow, first think about your lifestyle. First think about the quality of your experience and how can you build everything else around that so that you don't end up in a situation where you say, well, I don't have time for me. You start with you and you build everything else around that. And I think it's the opposite of what most people do is they first focus on what everybody else needs from me. And then I don't have the time or I don't have the energy. I'm just so exhausted that it would be really nice even when I have the time, but I'm so fried that I just want to plop down on the couch and watch Netflix.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, let me ask final question. Is there anything I haven't asked you when it comes to eliminating burnout that you want to share, whether it's about the mindset or preparation or any hidden opportunities that people might be overlooking?
I would say the biggest thing to remember is that just like anything else, whether it's depression, anxiety, what have you, burnout is something that happens as a result of chronic stress. Stress is about perception, that you can eliminate stress partially through the mind. And that's not to say that you don't make changes in your environment. And that's not to say that you're not proactive. You do all of those things. But sometimes we're so focused externally. We think that we feel the way that we do because of everything that's happening out there. It's my job, it's my industry, it's my boss, it's my coworkers, it's my kids, it's my husband, it's my wife, it's the world, it's COVID, right? But so much of it is a product of our own minds, which is good news because then you can actually change how you feel by focusing on those thoughts.
Great point. We have a final question here from a listener or person watching on Facebook. She says, you're on point with how to get your own mindset thinking and ways to ask yourself questions without thinking in a negative way. Does being burned out always mean you're not thinking or putting yourself in value first? It's a good question.
No, I mean, there are so many different reasons why people burn out. It can be because there's too many demands on your time and energy. It could be like our friend from General Motors that maybe he's just under challenge and he's bored, right? It could
Mm.
be because, yeah, because you think about things in a negative way and you beat yourself up and you're lacking in self-compassion and you're a perfectionist, or you have a ton of anxiety and your brain just naturally comes up with all worst case scenarios and you're constantly catastrophizing, or you have imposter syndrome. It could be because you're a people pleaser and you're always putting other people first. It could be for 100 different reasons. So what I like to do is I like to get to the root cause of burnout. So when you get on a call with me, what we do is we actually look at what is going on and I highlight for you exactly what is the underpinnings and what are the things that you need to focus on to turn the whole equation around.
That's great.
It's not a
So
one size
first,
fits all.
nah. So first off, I want to thank you. First we had someone else comment. I didn't put it on the screen that just says you have a kick-ass name, the Burnout Doc. So we're gonna,
Thank you.
and he wanted to know how to reach you. So we'll get to that in a second. So, and I've been putting you're obviously you've got all your contact information on your website, which has been scrolling here at the bottom. So.
Mhm.
If you're interested, please reach out to Dr. Sharon, the Burnout Doc. I also want to thank you for a great interview. You gave a lot of great advice on a topic that I think, um, probably through some personal experience, is a very important topic for a lot of business leaders. And I think this episode will give people a lot clearer understanding of what they need to do to find success and eliminate burnout moving forward. So, can you tell us a little bit about how people can reach you, and a little bit about maybe your website and what you offer on there, real quick?
Absolutely. So my website is drsharongrossman.com. And if you are wondering after listening to this, am I really burned out? What's going on for me? I would always invite people to take the very first step, which is to download. I've got a burnout checklist, which allows you to figure out what's going on for you. And based on that, what you should be focusing on. I also want to invite for those of you who are definitely seeing burnout signs and you're like, I already know that I'm burned out and I want to have a chat. I want to see if, maybe Sharon can help me. Then I invite people to schedule a breakthrough session with me. And to do that, to get on my calendar, you just go to bookachatwithsharon.com and you can schedule a time and we will actually go through everything that is happening right now. And as I said, we're going to look at your goals and the obstacles to those goals, where you want to be and where you are right now. And if I can help bridge the gap, I will let you know how I can do so, and then we can talk about what that looks like. So I invite listeners who are really resonating with our conversation today to take that next step and book that call. There's no cost and it's very high value for your time.
That's great. All right, we got Chuck wants to thank us as well. Um,
And thank
I
you
want
to
to thank you
everybody
again.
who popped in their questions and their comments. It's always
I
fun to have that engagement.
I agree. That's why I do it. I hope it doesn't distract from the thing, but in terms of when I put them up there, but I love the questions because it took our conversation in a couple different directions that we weren't planning to go, which obviously were important to the audience. So
Yeah.
I like it. So I want to thank you again. I also want to thank the MCC Nation for tuning in. Make sure you follow and subscribe to Move Crush Count, this podcast at movecrushcount.com, as well as you can subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Join our groups on Facebook and LinkedIn, where experts like Dr. Sharon, the Burnout Doc will be there and hopefully answer any questions you might have. And you get notified on future guests and new episodes. So do me a huge favor, everybody. Share this episode. For one, I
Mm.
think it impacts a lot of people, but the growth for the show also, we don't spend any money promoting it. So all our growth is organic. So it comes from people sharing with their friends, their colleagues, their coworkers, their family. Today's interview was sponsored by J&L Marketing. J&L is a digital and direct marketing agency that delivers results with strategies that help you outsmart your toughest competitors so you do not have to outspend them. And J&L Marketing has agreed to give away some Move Crush Count t-shirts. All right. So make sure if you're one of the first 7 people who message me either on LinkedIn, Instagram, or on Facebook Messenger, mention this interview. I'll get you a free t-shirt. Make sure you mention your size. So I shipped, so it's one you can actually wear. So once again, I am Scott Joseph. Dr. Sharon, thank you very much. And thanks for everyone for joining us on Move Crush Count. Have a great day.
And Scott, thank you so much for having this platform, sharing these tools and strategies with listeners out there. And I also want to just mention that if anybody really wants to get more into the burnout ideas, they can listen to Decode Your Burnout, which is my podcast, focus all on burnout.
Yep. No, that's great. And you have a link. Don't you have an event on LinkedIn coming up real quick? Don't you?
I do. I have an event called Exhausted to Extraordinary in 90 Days. So if you look that up under events on LinkedIn, you'll find it. And that is basically taking you through the 3 steps that we talked about today. So if you want to see that in action, then definitely register. It's absolutely free.
If LinkedIn gives me the opportunity to share that, I'll share that to my network as well. So
cool. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all very much.